Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part 3 of our pest education seminar on termite biology and control. Before we get started, we're going to go over a few rules. Please, everyone, mute your lines. You can use the chat box to ask questions. And for any additional questions not answered during our webinar, you can email us at education@nola.gov. And this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about termite control, which is a good understanding of your termite control options is very important when choosing the best protection of your home. Today's speaker is Dr. Carrie Catone. Dr. Catone has worked for the New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board since 2005 and currently serves as Assistant Director. She has a strong background in urban entomology with an emphasis on subterranean termites. Dr. Catone managed the Termite Control Division for New Orleans from 2011 to 2020. She received her PhD from the University of Florida in 2011 as a student of Dr. Nanyao Su. Her dissertation work was determining survival mechanisms of Formosan subterranean termites during times of flooding. And now, Dr. Catone.
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. I really do appreciate it. So to get started, there's kind of a caveat to this presentation, right? I get asked a lot of times, what do I do to treat my home for termites and how do I prevent them from entering my home? What we're going to be doing today is we are going to give our audience the tools that you need to understand the differences between different types of termite treatments so that you're comfortable with discussing your termite control options with a pest control company. And we want everybody to feel confident in choosing the termite control method that works for you and for your home and especially your budget, right? So what we won't be doing is we're not going to say, use this product because it's the best product on the market and it works every single time. So we don't do any endorsements, but this is for educational purposes only. So with that being said, I would also like to say that any mention or photograph of a particular product is also not an endorsement, but it's used for educational purposes. Okay, so when talking about termite control, it's really interesting to kind of step back in time a little bit to see what it used to be like when dealing with termites in your home. So in the early 1900s to the 1800s, there wasn't really much to do to actually kill termite colonies, right? So wood gets damaged from termites, and the main thing that people would do is they would just replace it as they needed to. Okay, that was considered home maintenance, and that's just how people dealt with termite issues. In 1928, it kind of switched to, oh, well, you have to remove the main colony nest. That's if you could find it, right? But make sure you spray it with kerosene or another type of light oil. So, we think of something like spraying with kerosene, not very safe. It's very highly flammable. So probably not advice that you would expect to hear or anybody to take seriously nowadays. Right. So the same with the 1930s. Okay. We had the first wood treatments during this time, but they were all very, very toxic. So we're talking about things that contained arsenic, like toxic paints, coal tar, creosote, petroleum, things that were quite toxic for people. They did start looking at preventative measures. So really paying attention to construction a little bit more and making sure that there was no wood to soil contact. So that was considered the termite preventative measure for that time. We also have our first soil insecticides on the market in the 1930s. So the first one on the market was Terminex, and this was done with treating trenches adjacent to the building's foundation, much like what we see with liquid termiticides nowadays. From the 1940s to 1950s, this is where we see the chlorinated hydrocarbons. Okay, I think most folks have heard the story of DDT and how that was on the market and then taken off of the market. But we also are looking at chlordane and aldrin and dieldrin as well. However, by by 1947, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act was put in place by Congress. And this was put in place to protect public health, preventing adverse effects of pesticides to the environment, and really stating that pesticides need to be regulated. Now, this has been amended a few times over the years. And under this act, it is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is responsible for registering and authorizing pesticide use in the United States. Okay, so by 1972, DDT was banned because of environmental effects. And there was a 5-year phase out period of chloridane also because it just stayed in the soil for way too long. So DDT was bioaccumulation throughout the food web, and chloridane just bound to the soil, wouldn't go anywhere. It would, and nowadays you see papers published where there were some cancerous effects of that as well. So over the years, we really have seen this push from the consumer end of, hey, we want more environmentally friendly products, we want reduced risk products, and that is really kind of the trend where pesticides are going. Okay, so no matter what type of subterranean termite control we're looking at, every single one has the same objective, and that is to protect the structure, right? The end goal is to protect your house. And there are a couple different types of ways we're going to be looking at today. The most common one that most people are, most familiar with are the barrier techniques. So this is where a trench is dug around a perimeter of a structure. Liquid termiticides are applied to it. There may be some physical barriers involved in as well. But really the goal here is to exclude termites from entering the structure at all. So it's barrier technique preventing termites from entering the structure. Population management approach is a little bit different. So the goal here is targeting actual colonies, like eliminating colonies to reduce overall termite pressure. And this is done through the use of bait technology. So when we're talking about subterranean termite control, I just want to do a brief review of what we already have heard about subterranean termite colonies from last week. So first, as their name implies, subterranean, they will be nesting under the soil surface, but they also nest within trees and within structures as well. They will have satellite nests as the colonies mature. So you will have several satellite nests that are connected through foraging galleries. Formosan subterranean termites are able to create carton nests, which is what you see in this bottom picture right here. And they can also form aerial nests. So they don't necessarily need soil contact to allow their colony to thrive. Okay, and they like to stay hidden and cryptic. They like living under soil surfaces and within their carton nest. And so those signs of infestation will be a lot more difficult to find. So this picture you might remember from last week. We have talked about how subterranean termites will nest and feed in multiple wood resources. So just because it finds a very sustainable food source that can sustain that colony for many, many years, they will still forage from there and attempt to find additional feeding sources as well. Now, you can have these satellite nests, these underground nests that are connected through underground tunnels, through foraging tunnels, and you can have all of these different food sources connected through these underground tunnels as well. So there can be a very intricate network fully underground that we can't see from the soil surface, but this diagram kind of depicts what could be happening inside of an infested structure. So signs of infestation, when you do see them, okay, a lot of times it will come in the form of finding mud tubes and swarm structures. Okay, so subterranean termites will create shelter tubes As you can see in this picture here, this is a pretty dramatic looking mud tube. It has gone unnoticed and untreated for quite some time. But sometimes they can be a little bit smaller, like these that we see on the right side of the screen. And they create these shelter tubes when they're foraging above ground. It helps maintain temperature and humidity, as well as providing protection from predators such as ants. And swarm structures are a little bit different. They look like these little mud packs that are typically seen in elevated areas, right? So not at ground level. And what that is the area where the termite reproductive cast will be swarming from during swarm season. So another sign of infestation are the observation of lots of termite wings or even termite swarmers. So our native reticulate termes will swarm during the day in early spring, and Formosan subterranean termites swarm at night from May to July. So we are right at the cusp of seeing some big swarms here in the New Orleans area. Now, when I say if you see termites swarming or wings, what I don't mean is if you find a dozen alates in your bathtub one morning or on a windowsill. You know, every homeowner that I've spoken to in New Orleans gets a few termite alates coming in their home from outside during swarm season. And typically they will just dry up and be dead by morning, either not finding a mate, not finding a suitable home to start a new colony. But when I say if you observe termite swarming or wings, I'm talking about a lot of wings, like what you would see in this picture here, or thousands of swarmers coming out of your wall. That would be a good indication of infestation. Another thing is, you know, you don't want to forget about the trees on your property. So termites infesting live trees, it can be a little bit tricky to find because they're not always just out on the bark like these mud tubes here that you see, although that is a very good indication of an infestation in a tree. But sometimes you have to dig a little bit and look at the base of that tree and see if you can find termites located at that base of the tree. Sometimes you have to drill into the tree. You know, we talked a little bit about that last week and actually getting a borescope and looking inside that tree. And trees are quite important for a couple of different reasons. Is one, of course, if you have an infested tree on your property, we know that termites will never stop foraging, and it's only a matter of time where they can find your house, right? So they will continue to forage out from that very suitable food source and put your house at risk of termite attack. Another thing is there can be a great amount of damage caused by falling trees when trees are highly damaged and strong storm winds come through. Okay, so getting into more of the nitty gritty of treatment options. Okay, I'm going to start by talking about borate treatments. Borates contain the element boron. Okay, this is a stomach poison for termites. It will disrupt the metabolic functions of termites that will feed on the treated wood. However, keep in mind that termites do need to ingest it. It's not a contact poison. They will have to ingest it to be affected by it, and it will affect individual termites as they try to feed on that wood. So these borate treatments, they are applied to lumber during the construction process. Okay, so this is not something that can be applied after construction is complete. This will need to be applied as a spray, powder, or foam when the structure is in this phase of construction, when all that lumber is exposed. There are several products available on the market, anything from Timbor, Boracare, Jectogel, Shell Guard. However, when you live in an area of high termite pressure, like what we see here in Louisiana, this is not recommended as a standalone treatment, meaning that you can do this and you can apply this to lumber as you're building your home if it's a new construction, but you're also going to want to use something else, either a liquid termiticide or base system, something like that. But you always want to check with your local Department of Agriculture for those regulations. So physical barriers are also on the market. There's a couple different ones. And the concept here is to seal off any entry points that termites might exploit to get into your house. So these are things that would be applied during construction over plumbing penetrations or expansion joints, things like that. So this is another thing that would have to be applied during the construction process. Except for these aggregate barriers. So these particle barriers are on the market that can also be placed around the perimeter of a structure and within the bath traps as well. And the idea behind these particle barriers is that they are too large for termites to manipulate with their mandibles, so they can't move them anywhere. And they are just the right size and shape that they pack too closely together for termites to just move through them. Okay, so there is a trench that is dug around the property and filled with this particle barrier. And you may say, well, termites can just go across the top of it. But really with the 4 inches, termites tend to dry out unless they can really create a good mud tube there. And so the idea there is that they can't gain access to the structure. Okay, so there are membranes and sealants on the market as well. Like I said, these would be applied during the construction process. So these membranes are very flexible and stretchable, and it provides waterproofing, vaporproofing, and also pest prevention. And this membrane that is applied along where all of those joint seams are, it's used in conjunction with a sealant that can be used around plumbing penetrations as well. Stainless steel mesh has been on the market for quite some time in the form of Termamesh and Termastop. So this is a marine grade stainless steel mesh. It's also installed during the construction process to block those termites. So termites can't move through it. It's a mesh that is too small for termites to get through, too tough for them to chew through. And the idea here is if you can help seal where the joints are and where the plumbing penetrations are, then it will block termites from gaining entry from the soil. However, this is something that is not a do-it-yourself project. This is something that must be installed by trained professionals. Termite shields, we're very used to seeing these on some of these raised houses here in Louisiana. Termite shields are metal barriers that fit on top of these pilings, as you can see under this house right here, that are being inspected right now. And what these do is they won't block termites completely, except the termites can't go through that center void within that hollow block right there. So they can't stay hidden. This is going to force termites to go around on the outside and build a mud tube that can be visually seen by a termite inspector. Okay, so these are recommended for use. They are installed during construction as well. But again, it's not to completely protect your home, but it does make inspection a lot easier because termites won't have access to that center void within those cinder blocks. Liquid termiticides, this is something that most folks are most familiar with when it comes to termite control. The goal here, like I said, is it is to protect the structure from foraging termites from entering into your home. Okay, so this type of treatment is used for infestation and preventative treatments, and also pre-treating the soil before construction even begins. And the idea here is to use a liquid termiticide to create a complete barrier around the entire structure. So we're talking under the structure and around the structure once it's built as well. And so again, we always have to consider all of these potential points of entry when we talk about termite control, right? Termites don't need a lot of space to gain entry into your house, okay? Just about a millimeter or so. And even with concrete slabs, you know, over time, these slabs do develop cracks in them that you really have to be cognizant of and know that termites can exploit those to gain entry into your house. We've talked about expansion joints as well, plumbing penetrations. Termites can follow those up to your home, and also conducive conditions such as wood being left right up next to the structure and allowing them kind of this is like the firewood highway for termites to gain entry into your house. So it's really, really important when you're thinking about termite control to understand the construction of your house. And this is something that, most homeowners, if you buy a little bit of older house, you're not going to have these blueprints like this. But it's really important to understand, is it a raised house or a slab house? If it's a slab house, do I know what kind of slab it is? Where are all of my plumbing penetrations? So things like that are really important to know and understand about your own house. So when it comes to liquid termiticides, there are repellents and non-repellents. Okay, so repellent termiticides will, as the name suggests, is going to repel termites from crossing over that treated soil, whereas non-repellents will allow termites to cross through that soil. They're not going to be repelled by it, but they will die from exposure to that pesticide once they go through that treated barrier. So some examples of repellent termiticides are things like dragnet and demon, with active ingredients like permethrin, cypermethrin, bifenthrin, fenvalerate, and the active ingredient is the lethal part of a pesticide. So if you are ever reading a pesticide label, it will list the active ingredient, and then it will also list inert ingredients, which is just the carrier for that pesticide. It could be water. If it's a solid pesticide, it might be something like clay, cornmeal, that kind of stuff. Examples of non-repellent termiticides are things like Termidor, which has the active ingredient fipronil. There's also Ultracet and Primus and Phantom as well. So these lists are not exhaustive, but it does give you examples of repellent and non-repellent liquid termiticides. So why would we want to use a non-repellent liquid termiticide? It seems a bit counterintuitive at first, until you realize what's kind of going to be going on under the soil surface. So if you have a repellent termiticide around your home as a complete barrier, what happens if you have a dog that starts digging in the soil, or you put in new landscaping and disturb that soil? Or anything like that could happen. And termites don't need a lot of space to exploit that gap, right? So about 1 millimeter wide they can get through. So those repellents will have low termite mortality because it'll be this barrier effect, but if there's any kind of breach in that barrier, termites will certainly exploit it. However, with the non-repellent termiticide, the termites won't realize that they are walking through termiticide-treated soil. They won't be repelled by it. And so they're going to walk through that treated zone and start dying off from their exposure to that termiticide. Okay, and there is some transfer of that chemical between nestmates. So you will have kind of a transfer effect as well with a non-repellent. So how are these termiticides transferred? Well, termites are social. They're constantly touching each other. They're either grooming or they're sharing food, or they are engaging in something called trophallaxis, which is basically nutrient sharing between nest mates. Okay, and termites don't realize that they're tunneling through soil treated with a non-repellent. So they come in contact with it. They will keep touching their nest mates and sharing food. And if that termiticide works slow enough, then the termites will have time to contact many more other termites and expose them to the pesticide as well. So you do have a higher kill rate with these non-repellent termiticides. Okay, so pre-construction liquid treatment, if you have ever had a home built from the ground up, you're probably familiar with this process. This is a process in which the soil beneath the home is treated for termites as a preventative shortly before a slab is poured. Okay, so it's not mandated by law, but you always want to check with your state regulators. So here in Louisiana, it's not mandated by law. However, if you do have a mortgage on that home, your lender's probably going to tell you that you absolutely have to have a pre-treat to get your loan. Okay, so this is, again, why I keep saying it's important to understand construction types and your foundation types. So this typically will require multiple treatments unless it's just one big solid slab. But if there are multiple concrete pours, you're going to need multiple treatments, okay? Just to make sure that the soil underneath the entire foundation is treated. So after construction is complete, the pest control company will come back and do a final perimeter treatments. That's where they dig the trench, apply the liquid termiticide around the perimeter of the entire home. Okay, so there are different slab types that folks are familiar with. And, you know, a lot of folks don't know what kind of slab they may have in their home. So there are monolithic slab, which everything is done in one concrete pour. There's supported slabs and partially supported slabs where you have, you know, like these joints right here that, hey, all it would take is a millimeter gap and termites can find their way in, right? Also with these floating slabs, you have these joints, okay? So as houses settle and soil settles, you can certainly develop gaps that are, you know, a millimeter thick. And then there's crawl spaces. There's a lot of raised homes in Louisiana. And so crawl spaces, that's a whole different type of foundation right there. So it is really important to understand what kind of construction your home was built with, whether it's a slab foundation or a raised foundation with a crawl space. But it just makes it really important to understand where those entry points could be for a termite colony. Okay, so post-construction liquid treatments, like I said, it's going to create that barrier or a treatment zone around the entire perimeter of the structure. So it's not just digging a trench and all the soil that you find. So part of that perimeter will undoubtedly have some kind of concrete to it, maybe a porch or a back patio. There might be some hollow block foundations that need to be drilled and treated. Any kind of concrete will need to be drilled and treated. Garden beds. So some homeowners don't want a big trench dug through their garden bed after they have spent, I don't know, several thousands of dollars on landscaping. So those can be treated by rotting instead of trenching. So instead of digging a trench and applying liquid termiticide, is basically, it looks like it's being injected. That's what rotting is. And any kind of cold joints and seams and concrete need to be drilled and treated as well. Dirt-filled porches can be very, very common. Those would also need to be drilled so that you can have access to that soil. And then you take that, basically your rotting unit and insert it and to treat the soil under that dirt-filled porch. And you always want to check with the label and your local regulators in regards to the minimum treatment specs. So here in Louisiana, the minimum specifications for a trench and treat is that the trench must be 4 inches wide by 6 inches deep. That's the minimum. But always check with your state regulators regarding that. Okay, here you can see a picture of what it looks like to drill through that concrete to gain access to the soil to treat it. And then here we have Timmy on our staff treating a trench and also treating the soil backfill. So you don't want to forget to treat that soil backfill before you put that soil back into the trench. So this unit right here is something that was put on the market by BASF. It is an injector unit that is to be used with the BASF product Termidor HP. So HP for high pressure. Basically, it has such a high pressure to it that it can directly just inject liquid into the soil around the perimeter of a home without the necessity of digging a trench around it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to bait technologies. When we talk about bait technology, we're really talking about population management. Okay, so I always kind of start this conversation by asking somebody, well, how do you kill a termite? So liquid termiticides will kill termites, right? Removing all or part of a nest, that's going to end up killing termites. But when we're talking about a social insect like termites, we want to see the colony as an entire organism in and of itself. So when you're talking about how do you kill a termite, yeah, chemicals and removing part of the nest, but also something as silly like, well, stepping on a termite, it's going to kill them, right? But we're not dealing with the entire colony on that level. Okay, so we're not going, so we can kill termites without eliminating a termite colony. Okay, population management focuses on eliminating those colonies. So why, so why does it even matter if we're eliminating termite colonies? Well, here in New Orleans and really along the southeastern US, it really does matter, right? So we consider that termite colonies can contain millions of individual termites within them. So we're looking at that colony as an organism in and of itself. You have a queen that's constantly producing eggs, so you can have colonies that reach into the millions of individual termites. Colonies can have multiple queens, and we have incredibly high pressure here in New Orleans as far as termites go. So we can have many, many colonies in a relatively small area. So our risk of termite attack here is quite high. So really, it's very advantageous for us, at least in this part of the country, to look at population management and eliminating colonies. Okay, so baits work by exploiting the social behavior of termites. And how this works is the termite bait is in the soil, okay? Foraging termites, as termites do, they're constantly foraging. Through these natural foraging tendencies, they will locate these bait stations that are in the soil. Worker termites start to feed on that bait. They're like, yeah, this is pretty good. So they want to communicate that with other termites to get them to eat the bait as well. And they will tend to forage in areas with high moisture and wood resources. So areas where there might be some drainage problems, things like that, wood to ground contact, those are always good areas to put these bait stations. And granted, they are capable of locating and exploiting very small gaps. So it's not nothing is going to be a miracle treatment for termites. They can certainly make their way between two bait stations, but they will locate them just through their natural foraging tendencies. Okay, so once workers start feeding on this bait, there's also this kind of exchange of food and these regurgitated liquids between colony members. So that bait active ingredient gets shared among the entire colony, okay? So keep in mind though, some casts can't even feed themselves. So workers will feed larvae, they're too little, their mandibles are not sclerotized enough to feed themselves. Soldiers, their mandibles are too large in order to break off pieces of wood and feed themselves. So they rely on the workers as well. And the workers will feed the queen. So the advantage here is that you don't have to have a termite to be directly in contact with this bait station. They don't have to directly feed on it in order to be affected by that active ingredient. And so once the workers start sharing food and delivering this active ingredient to everybody else in the colony, that's how that is. That's how the bait product is dispersed throughout the colony. And there are several products available to consumers. There's Advance from BASF, there's Xterra, Centricon is the product of Corteva. There's First Line and Terminate as well. And there are certain characteristics that these product manufacturers really look for a successful termite bait active ingredient. For one thing, there cannot be any feeding deterrents, right? You want termites to feed on the bait. They want it to be very palatable for termites so that when termites come in contact with it, they absolutely will begin to feed on it. It needs to be slow acting. And this can also sound really counterintuitive, but if there are sick and dead and dying termites from feeding on a bait and it acts really quickly, you have all of these dead termites in close proximity to a bait station, that's actually going to end up repelling other termites in the colony from being around that bait station. And another thing is you want termites to have the time to transfer the active ingredient in a bait product to other members of the colony before dying. So a dead termite isn't going to transfer any food to its nest mates. Okay, bait products also need to be dose independent. So that active ingredient needs to have the same effect on termites, whether that termite eats a little bit of it or a lot of it. So active ingredients for baits over the years that have been tried, metabolic inhibitors have been tried, juvenoids have been tried, but really the main one that you'll see on the market nowadays are these chitin synthesis inhibitors, such as hexafluoron, novafluoron, and novaluron. And how those work is it inhibits the production of chitin within that insect. So chitin is a necessary component of the insect's exoskeleton, and termites will molt for life. So they need to be able to produce chitin in order to molt. And if they're not doing that, then they will end up dying. So if a termite can't molt because it's not producing any chitin, it will end up dying. So no matter what bait product you're putting around your home, the installation of these in-ground stations is very similar to each other. Of course, you always want to make sure that you're following the label directions. But, you know, the labels are going to say a maximum of 20 feet apart for these baits. We use 10-foot spacing here in New Orleans just because our termite pressure is so high. And it's really great if you can find areas of conducive conditions to put these next to. Like I said, any kind of moisture accumulation or any kind of wood to ground contact, that kind of stuff you're going to look for when placing these bait stations. But at any rate, the idea here is that you create a hole in the soil in which the station can fit, insert that station into the soil, and you're going to want to make that bait station flush with the soil surface, because if there's any part of it sticking out, it could easily get run over by a lawnmower, or it might trip somebody walking through the yard. Okay, so what do you do in areas where there is no soil access? So here we have a picture of the French Quarter. You can see St. Louis Cathedral right there in the background. But as you can see, from door to door across the street, it's nothing but concrete. So what do we do in this kind of situation? Well, to install these stations within concrete, you have to get through the concrete to gain access to the soil. Okay, so the first thing you do is you will pour a 3-inch hole through the concrete to reach the soil. And then once you do reach that soil, then you can create an area in which that station is going to fit. So sometimes you'll need to drill out more soil and remove it with an auger, or you may have to pack more soil in there. Okay. And then just so you don't have a hole in the concrete that somebody can trip over or fall over, you will cover that with a port cover. And yes, of course, those port covers can be purchased through our office as well. We make them right here. So above ground bait stations are an excellent tool to keep in your toolkit when doing termite control, but not all bait systems have this option. Okay, as of right now, the only bait system that has this as an option is the Centricon system. but it does allow for very targeted application. So it is essentially a box that contains bait product within it. And this can be placed over any area of known termite activity. So if there is a mud tube and you break it open and you see it's very active with termites inside of there, that would be an ideal situation to put one of these above ground bait stations. So what it does is you can put this up against where there's known termite activity, and it reduces the time that would be required for termites to forage through the soil and locate those bait stations. There's also very flexible station placement. So these can go just about anywhere as long as they can be sealed. Okay, and because it still has the same active ingredient, it's going to fit that overall population management concept as well. So some advantages and disadvantages of baits. So baits will use very small quantities of toxicants, so it's not going to be very toxic to mammals at all. It's very target specific for the insects. It can be applied around the perimeter without the need for digging a trench or drilling holes in concrete every 12 inches apart like you would need to do for a liquid termiticide treatment. They can be placed on a structure directly. You can affect, really large colony populations, so you can really have a much greater impact on termite populations. And it can be a standalone treatment. So it does not require a soil liquid termiticide around the perimeter of a structure in order to put bait stations around. They are mutually exclusive. Okay, so you don't need one to have the other. And if baits are used in conjunction with a liquid treatment, they should not be installed within that treatment zone. Okay, so if they are put too close to soil that has been treated with a liquid termiticide, you will still have that buildup of sickly, dying termites. You run that risk. And then those are just going to keep other termites away from your bait stations. Okay, so some disadvantages, it really kind of depends on how often you need to check your stations as far as what the labor costs are. What we see on the market nowadays with the advanced stations and the Centricon stations they have a highly dense cellulose matrix that the active ingredient is mixed with. So they only need to be checked once a year, which is a huge game changer. We used to have to check them either monthly or quarterly. It does take time for termites to locate these stations. So you don't get that instant termite death that, people tend to like to see with a spray rig on the back of a truck with with a liquid termiticide treatment. So that, if you don't get that instant gratification, sometimes that can be a little bit difficult to explain to a customer. And you do have gaps between the stations. So this is not just there's no silver bullet here. Termites can exploit gaps between these stations. But if they are, creating mud tubes on your slab, you can put an above ground station there. Also, just know that termites have probably already located the neighboring bait stations from where you might see them coming up as well. Okay, so one question that I get from a lot of homeowners is what happens if baits are removed after the colonies are eliminated, right? So I paid a lot of money to have bait stations put around my house. Termites were killed. I feel like my home is safe. Now, can I just remove them so I don't have that annual bill? Well, I like to kind of show this data set to folks with that question. So here we have the French Quarter right here in New Orleans along the Mississippi River. And right adjacent to it, we have Louis Armstrong Park. Okay, and Louis Armstrong Park was a research site that went on for decades. Okay, it has a very large history of infestation within the park. There's been a lot of studies going on here. So one of the studies that happened was to see, okay, so what happens if we do take out baits and we know, because we're not seeing any additional colonies pop up. Okay, so before this time, before 2002, there were these studies that described these very large, stable colonies within the park. It created a kind of a model of what termite colonies were doing in very large, undisturbed areas. And their foraging territories were delineated through methods such as mark, release, recapture, where you're dying termites and collecting them in other places so you can kind of map out their foraging territory, and also through genetic work. Okay, so from all of these 800 in-ground monitoring stations, these were the colony foraging territories that we marked out. The yellow ones are Formosan colonies, and the red ones are the native reticulotermes colonies within this park. So Matt Messenger, actually in 2005, published this. He eliminated all detectable colonies using bait products. And the reinvasion by neighboring and newly established colonies was monitored. So colonies within the park started to increase after baits were removed. So all the colonies were wiped out, baits were taken up out of the ground, and within 5 years, this is the map that we see. Okay, again, this was done using mark, release, recapture methods and genetic testing. And the park really had the same termite pressure as there was 5 years ago, just from taking up the baits. Now, this is from neighboring colonies expanding their foraging territories, and also from alate swarms, where the alates pair up and they begin new colonies. Okay, so once baits are in the ground, this is why I say if you're along the southeast US, especially, once baits are in the ground, you're going to want to keep them in the ground, even if you're not seeing new activity, just because termite pressure is so high. So baiting in areas with high termite pressure can create some very interesting data sets as well. This was another publication by Matt Messenger and others. This was another Armstrong Park study. So on this map here, this black and white image, there is this island within Armstrong Park, okay? And all of the termite colonies on this island were delineated using mark, release, recapture. So we have a 1, 2, 3 Formosan subterranean termite colonies and a very small reticulotermes colony infesting that building. And what Matt did was he decided to install a bait station here, right, for this yellow colony. And what he saw was that as that yellow colony was dying off, it was being eliminated, so its foraging territory was shrinking. That red colony decided to spread out a little bit and, kind of take over some of those underground foraging galleries until it completely took over where that yellow colony was residing. Now, if that bait had been left in the ground, that red colony would then begin to feed on that bait and also be eliminated as well. Okay, so let's talk very briefly about fumigation and what that looks like and how that works. So we're going to be talking about what a fumigant is, why somebody would fumigate, and the different steps in structural fumigation. Okay, so first off, fumigants are pesticides that work in a gaseous state. So 3 physical states of matter. As with pesticides, you have gas, liquids, and solids. So fumigants are gases. Liquids are things like solutions, aerosols, emulsifiable concentrates, and solids are things like dust, granular, and wettable powders. Okay, so there are different types of fumigation. There's commodity, what you might see in these ship containers. There's soil fumigation for crops, and there's structural fumigation for homes. However, there's also boat fumigations as well. So boats that become infested with termites, and yes, they do become infested with termites as well as bed bugs. Fumigation is probably boat fumigation is probably one of the only times that I would say, yes, you can go ahead and fumigate for a subterranean termite colony just because it's isolated to that boat. And once those tarps hit the water's surface, that will help create a seal to conduct that fumigation. So the steps to structural fumigation include proper pest identification. You have to measure the structure, seal it up. There's certain things you have to do to the interior to prepare it for fumigation. The actual fumigation itself, the release of that gas into the property, into the structure, monitoring and aerating. So, we keep saying during this seminar series that proper identification is crucial to control, and this is why, okay? So drywood termites should never ever be treated with a bait system. Those are only for subterranean termites. And fumigations are typically not used to treat subterranean termites, okay? Because there's no residual, and termites within the gallery system are just going to be ready to reinfest that home. Okay, but if we're talking about drywood termites, we can talk about fumigation. Okay, it's completely appropriate. So several different types of drywood termites here in Louisiana. Remember, drywood termites are the ones that will be living in the wood that they're feeding on. So these guys are not going to be tunneling through the soil. They have much smaller colonies, and they look a lot different. Okay, so one thing that we've talked about are the cross veins in the wings for identification. So if you see cross veins in the top two veins, between the top two veins of the termite wing, then you're looking at a drywood termite. Also, the pronotum, that neck-like structure, will be as wide as the width of the head. And if the drywood termite has sharpened mandibles, you'll also see these marginal teeth along the inside of those mandibles. Okay, wood damaging beetles. Okay, we talked a little bit about the damage that they cause last week, but these are also very appropriate for fumigation. So the powder post beetle, false powder post beetle, and the death watch beetle as well. Stored product pests. So not really getting too much into these guys during a termite webinar, but just know that it is appropriate to fumigate for these as well. Bed bugs. Bed bugs have really kind of been in the news in more recent years, and kind of seen an uptick of bed bugs and an uptick of companies that are doing fumigation work for bed bugs as well. Okay, so a couple things here. This chart kind of shows what kind of color, odor, some of the properties of a couple different fumigants that are on the market, both methyl bromide and sulfurofluoride. One thing to note, though, they are both colorless and odorless when they are at a low concentration. So it's pretty amazing what kind of crazy things people might do. But let's say you have a homeowner that is trying to re-enter their home while it's being fumigated. Well, there's no antidote for the lethal dose of either one of these products. And in a low enough dose, it's going to be colorless, and it's going to be odorless as well, which is why we use chlorpicrin. Okay, and I'll talk more about that later, but that is the warning agent. It's like tear gas. It warns everybody that might have been left inside that structure that something bad is happening inside that building and it's time to get out. So that is used as a warning agent. So to prepare the structure, the fumigator is going to provide a checklist to the homeowner, and food can either be double bagged inside special bags or removed completely. All plants and pets have to be removed. So Sally the goldfish, Rufus the dog, and all of your house plants need to be removed. So because it's a biocide and it will kill anything that's living. Okay, all the cabinet doors need to be opened up so that gas can funnel through every single square inch of that structure. But it is the responsibility of the pest management professional to do the final look through and inspection of all areas of the house. So the next step is to measure the structure. So we're not just looking at square footage here, we're actually looking at volume of the structure. So the length, the width multiplied by the height, and that's how you get your volume. Okay, and then that structure has to be sealed and completely secured. So it is sealed with these tarps, and the use of clamps is done just to get a really good seal, because you don't want any of that gas escaping during the fumigation. It costs money, so it's money lost, and it's also not going to be as effective as a treatment. Okay, so the seal is really, really important. Also, proper signage. So you want it in, bilingual, danger, deadly poison, skull and crossbones. So clearly there is something dangerous going on inside this house. So fumigating with bicane gas, this is an example here, says what's going on, and all people need to keep away. One thing to prevent homeowners from trying to re-enter their property is having an additional lock on that door. So it may not be enough just to have the homeowners hand over their copy of their house key. Okay, so this is actually the most dangerous work that somebody could do as a termite control professional. So to prepare the structure, you can see in these pictures, all the file cabinets are opened up, all the doors are opened up. Fans are used to really kind of get that air circulating throughout the structure to get the fumigant really evenly dispersed and very quickly. This here is a picture of, this is a chlorpicrin pan by a fan to get that spread out as a warning agent. Again, that acts more like a tear gas. So anybody who might have been left inside, it's kind of like the final get out now. This is your warning. And trust me, when that chlorpicrin is released, if there's anybody inside that building, they will want to leave. So checking the structure and releasing the fumigant here. So again, if anybody is entering that structure from that point forward, they're going to want to use one of these self-contained breathing apparatuses. Okay, and these guys are very, very specially trained on this. Here you can see the releasing of the gas. And while it's releasing, these guys actually have this canister on a scale, so they know exactly how much of that gas is being released. So it's really important to follow the directions on these fumigants and get properly trained on it, because there's an entire aspect of gas diffusion and calculating, when the proper concentration is reached and keeping it there for a specified time before you have to aerate it. Okay, so if you don't have the proper concentration for the proper amount of time, you may not be killing an entire termite colony, right? So here we have a chart from least susceptible to most susceptible. So you have eggs, larvae, worker, soldier, pre-alate, those are the nymphs, and then the alates as well. So you want to make sure you're killing off everybody in that termite colony. We've seen this chart before where termite control nationwide is $1 billion business. It takes a huge bite out of everybody's pockets. If you have a termite infestation, it's not going to be covered by your homeowner's insurance. That's going to be straight out of pocket. So now what? Okay, here in New Orleans, we do have a saying where it's not if you ever get termites, it's when. So if you're here as a local, when you get termites in your home, now what? What do I do? It's the end of the world. Not necessarily. This is going to be a job for the professionals, though, first and foremost. Termite control will never be a do-it-yourself kind of operation. But you can inspect your property regularly for signs of termites, like the mud tubes and the alate wings, like what we've seen in these presentations. If you find that you have active termites in your home, let's say you find a mud tube, you break it open and you see termites walking, okay, please do not disturb that area any further. I know that is like the hardest thing that I ever have to tell homeowners is like, don't mess with the termites once you find them, okay? Because if a pest control professional knows where the termites are, they will know, hey, I can put an above ground bait station there, or hey, I need to treat in this area. But if you go through and you start spraying over the counter insecticide, you want to spray it with Raid, something like that, you are just going to chase them to another part of your house. And then nobody's going to know where they went to for a while. Okay, so just know that once you find the termites, the damage is already done. The time that it would take a pest control company to get out to your house, get you a quote, get the treatment, it's not going to cause significantly more damage from that point forward. Okay. But how do you select your pest control company? So there's a few tips and tricks we like to provide for homeowners. Is a few questions that you can ask the pest control company, right? So how long have you been in business, and how long have you been at your present address? Okay. Also, you can ask for a list of references. You can look at the Better Business Bureau and State Department as well. And you should be asking the person that will actually be performing the services, are they certified, licensed pesticide applicator, or a licensed technician? So here in Louisiana, we have licensees and we have technicians. Technicians can work under folks with licenses, no issue there, but there needs to be at least one certified licensed commercial pesticide applicator in the proper service category. Here, it would be structural pest control or termite control. Okay, so tips for selecting a pest control company. We have talked about licenses. This is actually a picture of what a Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry card looks like. This is actually Claudia's license right here. So that is what that card would look like. Ask them to provide a copy of their pest control license. Don't be afraid to ask for copies of labels of what they'll be treating and using around your home. Also, safety data sheets. So you can ask for safety data sheets. They will have all of the first aid information on there. If you read the label, it'll tell you how exactly that pesticide should be applied according to the law. Okay, so a company should be easy to contact. You can look up reviews about them as well. So there should be an office location with phone numbers on that website as well. So it's really important to understand what the issues are from a pest control perspective. So it should be a pest control company that shows up, the PMP does an inspection, can properly identify what kind of termites you're dealing with, and also discuss the construction of your property, okay, to understand the possible entry points. You can also see if that pest control company has any kind of optional certification. So these are optional, but a lot of license holders are either certified in OSHA, HAZWOPER, or they carry the title of a board certified entomologist or associate certified entomologist. So that just kind of tells you that they have gone kind of above and beyond the call of duty there, because you don't have to have you don't have to be a board certified entomologist to get a license in termite control. Okay, so pest control services, whether it's termites or roaches or rats, it really is a partnership between a pest management professional and their customer. So things that the customer should be able to expect from their pest control company is the name of the products that will be used around their home, as well as copies of the pesticide label. Okay, precautionary information for potential health effects in case of exposure. What kind of formulation we're looking at. So is it a liquid or is it a bait system, that kind of things, and where those products are going to be used. Your pest control company should be able to explain to you exactly how the products work, and what their responsibilities are going to be in order for it to be a successful treatment. Okay, they should also be relaying to their customer any kinds of precautions or conducive conditions that need to be remedied around their customer's home before they do the treatment. So they may say, hey, I'm going to be doing this treatment, but I need you to move that firewood away from the house and store it somewhere else, so we don't have that wood to ground contact, things like that. That should be communicated to the customer. So the remediation of conducive conditions will help ensure that a integrated pest management program will be in place. And the customer should also understand from the pest control company that a pesticide treatment alone is not always the solution. Okay, so that's why you want to work with your pest control folks to really remedy those conducive conditions. Okay. As far as the pest experts go, just know like their time and experience does need to be valued and compensated fairly. Okay. It's okay for them to say, I don't know, but a lot of times they will go and they will ask a colleague or an expert and get their correct information to you. Okay. So, you also want to find your local experts in the area. You can consult and discuss with them as well as your pest management professional if needed. So integrated pest management, I mentioned it in my last slide. So what is that? So really it's more of a holistic approach to pest control. So not just spraying, not just doing one thing or the other. It's really dealing with knowing how to do a proper inspection and proper pest identification, to monitoring, to treatment, to also removing conducive conditions. Okay, so it is a much larger approach than just somebody coming by, putting down a liquid termiticide or a bait system and walking away from that property. Okay, so what a customer should expect from the PMP, again, the pest control company will probably recommend you remediate some conducive conditions around your house. Some you may not even know about. If you have landscaping that's right up touching the side of your house and they can't see that slab, they're going to tell you to either trim that back or remove it completely, things like that. You want to maintain regular service, so know when they'll be coming back onto your property. Is it going to be an annual inspection or are they going to be biannual, things like that. And then there are certain things that a pest management professional should expect from their customers. So please, if you own a home and your pest control company says, please take care of this moisture issue or the leak in your roof, or these plants are too close to your house, please help me help you. Please take their advice. Okay. It makes their job easier and the treatment is going to be so much more successful than if you just ignore it. Now, however, there may be some pest control companies out there where, let's say, you're not able to get out there and deal with your landscaping. You can ask, and they may provide it as an add-on service. Okay. Please inform your pest control company if you see pests around. Have information handy, such as the date, time, and location, to them as soon as possible. And make sure that you are compensating your folks on time, pay your bills on time in order to keep your contract current. Okay. And a termite contract can either be, so there's pre-construction contracts and post-construction. Okay, a subterranean termite contract will be different from a wood destroying insect report. In Louisiana, termite contracts are regulated by the Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry. And it's by a law that requires those who are licensed to treat the property for subterranean termites to enter into a standard written contract. Okay, so any kind of subterranean termite work in Louisiana will be under a contract. So again, you want to make sure to maintain that regular service. The standard contract for subterranean termites in Louisiana has a retreat provision only. So there's not necessarily going to be a damage guarantee. So you have your homeowner's insurance not paying for termite damage. The pest control company is not paying for it. So just know, if you are in Louisiana, you will definitely want to have some kind of termite contract on your home, because if it does need to be retreated, this is your protection here. Okay. A company is not obligated to sell a customer a contract with a damage guarantee. But let's say they come out, you sign the contract, they treat, and if there's termites that pop up and are causing damage within that year, they will come out and retreat for those termites. Okay, but make sure that you read your contract carefully. If it is for subterranean termites, you might want to make sure that it will cover Formosan subterranean termite. You need to make sure that you're keeping your home in good repair, not super cluttered. You don't want to make things way too difficult for a termite inspector. And just know that please work with your pest control company. If they need to open up walls to see what's going on inside of your walls, you can work that out with them. There will always be areas that are not visible at the time of inspection. And that means that there may be an infestation at the time of that inspection that goes unnoticed. Okay, so inspections are a snapshot in time, what they see, but nobody can look through walls. So perhaps termites had just gotten in there, and they just weren't able to detect them at that time. Okay, so wood destroying insect reports, we kind of talked about that last week. It's always a good idea to determine if insect damage is observed. So again, that is like a snapshot in time. These are the conditions of this home right now. And these are the signs of wood destroying insects that the inspector sees. Okay, so these are done mostly for real estate transactions. So if you're taking a mortgage out, you're buying a home, the lender is going to ask for that wood destroying insect report as well. So the pesticide and environmental programs, this is a division of Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry. It is the state's lead agency in regulation of pesticide use. So it is their purview to kind of investigate if pesticides may be used unlawfully against the label. So the Pesticide and Environmental Programs Division is responsible for licensing and training, overseeing worker protection and registering pesticides for sale within the state. So they want to ensure proper labeling, distribution, storage, disposal, use, and application. This is for Louisiana. If you are located in a different state, make sure that you know who your state regulators are to reach out to them to make sure that you are following any additional state regulations within your state. Okay, so resources for the consumer. There are, a few ways to do your homework before selecting a termite control company. It's a good idea to talk to more than one company, so pick 2 or 3 to get quotes and their recommendations. You can also ask your extension agents at your local university entomology departments, okay? There are national pest control associations such as at pestworld.org, that's the National Pest Management Association, okay? Or I'm sorry, Alliance. So we also have the PPMA, Professional Pest Management Alliance, and there's federal agencies such as EPA, CDC, and USDA. So this is a list of a whole bunch of different resources. You can also use us as a resource when it comes to termite control. If you have questions, again, we are not going to say go with this company and with this kind of treatment. We can help you determine what treatment method might be best for your home and what you should also be looking for in a contract. But we're not going to, tell you, oh, well, choose this guy. He's less money than this other guy over here. We do not endorse. So in summary, there's a variety of products for termite management, and I really hope that this presentation provides a greater understanding of your options and what's out there. It's really important for homeowners to understand the products available for termite control so that you can make informed decisions and know what questions to ask your pest control company. Because this is a professional market, okay? Termite control, it is not a do-it-yourself type of job. Pest management professionals definitely have the expertise and a lot more tools available to them. So with that, if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. I will remind everybody that our last webinar in the Termite Biology and Control series is going to be on Tuesday, April 22nd. We're going to be talking about protecting our trees from termites. It's going to be virtual, but it's also going to be in person. So if you are here locally in the New Orleans area, feel free to register for that. And you can come on by. Our administration building will be set up in the training room for the in-person, and then it can be viewed virtually as well. And make sure you're following us on social media. okay, at NOLA Mosquito on X, Instagram, and Facebook. So we are right on the cusp of termite swarm season. And so we are going to be posting very shortly our swarmometer. So we have a termite alate trap that we keep in our garage downstairs next to a rather bright light. And it stays on overnight. And then the next day we count termites that we have caught on a glue board underneath that light. And so it goes from, just a few to steadily climbing all the way to, if we see a lot of termites there, that's going to be our termite date night. So feel free to follow us on social media. And I want to thank everybody for coming.
Yeah, Carrie, I checked the chat and we don't have any questions, so I'll echo your thanks and thank everyone for coming today, and we'll see everyone next Tuesday. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you.